Welcome, everyone. We're happy that you were able to join us. My name is Alba Cruz-Hacker. I am the CEO of the Integrity Institute, and we're really excited about this partnership that we're having with Bluwall and how we will be able to help us support and advance the trust and safety efforts throughout Latin America. We have our panelists today, and I have the honor of introducing them. First, we have Theodora Skeadas. She is the co-chair of the Integrity Institute Board of Directors. We also have Paulo Deus. He is the founder of Bluwall, but he is also the co-chair of the Partnerships Committee of the Integrity Institute. Then we have Alexandra van Nievelt. She is the other co-chair of the Partnerships Committee. And finally, not least, we have Ohana von Montfort, who is the head of training at Bluwall. Again, thank you so much for joining us. I think that this partnership that we have developed with Bluwall would be of particular interest and help in the region. With that, I want to turn over to our co-chair, Theodora, to give us a little bit of an idea of who we are and what we do at the Integrity Institute. Theodora?
Great. Thank you, Alba. Hey, everyone. It's very nice to be here with you all. So, the Integrity Institute is a community of over 600 trust and safety practitioners. We represent well over 90 different companies, and we represent 23 different countries. So, while we were started in the United States, we have a global remit, in part because our work is global, and it's important that we have folks from all over the world who are doing this important work. We operate as a global think tank focused on responsible technology. What this means is that we have a community focus to the work, but we also have an advisory focus where we leverage the expertise of our members in service of organizations like regulatory bodies. Our members bring their own experience, which they've built across building, deploying, and governing complex online platforms and AI systems for billions of people worldwide, all over the globe. So, our mission is to advance the theory and practice of protecting the digital information ecosystem powered by our community of integrity professionals. And our vision is that the digital information ecosystem should help individuals, societies, and democracies to thrive. So, what do we do? Well, we strengthen how platforms and AI systems do trust and safety by improving standards, practices, and accountability. We also are working to advance public understanding of trust and safety work so that a whole bunch of different stakeholders understand why this is and why it matters and what good constitutes. This is very tricky in part because, as you can imagine, there are so many competing narratives about what trust and safety or content moderation is depending on the audience. And so we're trying to break through the noise here. And third, but certainly not least, is that we're trying to increase the influence and power of trust and safety professionals so that they can shape decisions, guide responsible product development, and then protect people most impacted by digital harms.
Thank you so much, Theo. And now Ohana is going to walk us through a little bit what Bluwall, who they are and what they do.
Thank you, Alba. Very happy to be here and with this partnership with Integrity Institute. So, Bluwall is a company founded in Brazil. We have a specialist with international industry experience, and most of all, we are focused on Latin American market. We bring global trust and safety best practices for business that runs in Brazil or in the Latin American overall. Our goal is strengthening digital security, regulatory compliance, and trust through a tailored, impact-driven approach of business, and to deliver customized operational support, specialized training, and strategic consulting. What that does mean? This means that Bluwall is prepared to provide a specialized BPO, for example, in diverse areas of trust and safety. For example, on liaison or law enforcement outreach, we can also provide services in law enforcement response or public safety response. We provide consulting to those business that doesn't know yet how to build a trust and safety environment in their companies. And we also give trainings to those that already have these teams, but they don't know exactly how to efficiently operate them. So we have experts with backgrounds in leading global multinationals. We have international industry experience, and we we have business overall to strengthen these areas that is not only linked to trust and safety, but also to many other sectors of the business. So our mission is to transform how LATAM companies approach trust and safety, raising local standards to global benchmarks. That doesn't mean that we are bringing only the local standards. That means that we integrate the best practice of a local region to what it means globally to efficiently operate. We also build safer, more transparent and sustainable digital environments. We turn regulatory and operational challenges into strategic opportunities. We strengthen security, compliance, reputation, and trust. And we deliver measurable, lasting impact that positions organizations at the forefront of global trust and safe practices.
Thank you so much, Ohana. And with that, I want to ask a question first. We're gonna turn it over to Theodora. But why, right? What is the importance of practitioner expertise? Why practitioner expertise is critical in advancing trust and safety to inform regulators, industry, civil society, and the public at large?
Sure. Yes, this is an important question. Like, why actually do we exist as a think tank and an advisory organization? Well, as we see it, practitioners actually understand how harms manifest in the real world, not just in abstract or in theory, but in reality. How do these harms manifest, and how do they grow between platforms and across platforms? Because a lot of us have worked across different platforms. We understand how implementation happens. So if we're looking to remove harmful content or provide some kind of appeal for users or evaluate a system for bias, we actually understand how this works in practice. We also understand trade-offs because there are no easy choices or very few easy choices in this environment. And so we've actually had to deal with making trade-offs between, let's say, safety and privacy or other critical considerations that don't necessarily go hand in hand always. We bring institutional memory. We can also offer perspectives that are not just complementary, but adversarial, having worked to understand how adversaries are operating in these environments, and we can connect policy to measurement. So, as is noted here, we've really been on the front lines of thinking about the intersection of technology and society and how harms manifest. We've worked directly with vulnerable users. We've set up trusted flagger programs or helplines for organizations that connect journalists, human rights defenders, activists, women, other minority groups to our platform so that we can protect them specifically, given the vulnerable work that they do. We are working on the front lines of information integrity, often in electoral contexts, and yeah, have a lot of experience, as is noted here, specifically on the ground in a way that we think can help organizations undertake their efforts in a more efficient and successful way.
Thank you so much, Theodora. And then, why do you think this expertise is vital for emerging tech hubs like Latin America, Alex?
Thank you. Thanks, Alba. Yeah, I think probably the most useful way I can answer this question is to uh, answer with a question that companies have asked me, which is like every time I pitch trust and safety is like, how is that different from what my compliance and my fraud team already does? And I think it's a fair question and it deserves a direct answer. So what is the added value that trust and safety practitioners are bringing to the region? Um, I would say that compliance tells you what the law requires. And if you are unlucky, it may tell you what the law required, say, 2 years ago. And then fraud tells you where you're losing money right now. And you need both of those, but none of them is trust and safety. Between those, there's a gap. And almost every expensive mistake that I've seen a company walk into, both in LATAM and in other regions, is in that gap. And it could be counterfeit goods. It could be a scam that uses your platform to find a victim and then transact somewhere else entirely. But all of that costs nothing per the transaction. So it's not showing up in your fraud systems, for instance. Some of the harms that trust and safety practitioners try to protect may be things that are not yet illegal in the region because they involve technology, or they may be not legal matters, but rather undesirable behaviors in your platform, things that don't foster trust in the community. So compliance may not own it, and fraud doesn't own it. But one random Tuesday morning, your CEO is going to own it. So really, I think in Latin America, there's like a very exciting opportunity because there's been all these big companies that have learned from expensive and very public mistakes in the US and other parts of the world. And now LATAM can learn from that and really start by bringing trust and safety practitioners to the region and to their companies and building the defense systems from the start instead of in a reactive fashion after there's a big mistake or a very public escalation. So that's my best pitch for the region.
Thank you so much, Alex. I really appreciate it. And now we're going to turn specifically to the region and sort of set up a trilemma, if you will. There seems to be a tension between regulation, user expectation, and the local readiness. So let's start with regulation. And this is going to go to Paulo. Can you offer some insight regarding the regulatory and legal landscape in the region?
Absolutely, Alba. Thank you for the question. So this is something we have been noticing. It's increasingly happening here in our region, right? Uh, uh, the impression I have is that governments, in a sense, seem to almost be a bit scared of the digital platforms behave, the possibilities that happen within, and also, of course, people who put themselves in danger are or actually criminals who are trying to scam people or try to predate on minors. So this is something that's actually happening. And the response governments can give to that is, of course, regulation and judicial rigor. So in this sense, we see in many countries now and then governments doing a pretty good job into this regulatory field, but in other ways they are just overdoing it, right? Some kind of overregulation, because again, that's the way they can behave or respond to what we're seeing as some kind of risks or threats to local or domestic people. And we can look at some examples of that throughout our Latin America regions, right? Of course, I would start with Brazil because it's the biggest country and has all eyes turned to it whenever we are dealing, especially with regulation. And one that probably stands out the most is the digital ECA. I'm pretty sure everyone heard about it at some point. So the digital ECA created some kind of earthquake in digital relations between platforms and users, and of course, government in our region, in our country. I mean, especially in terms of online safety for minors. And among the most important obligations that this new bill created are the requirement for platforms to potentially use that can potentially be used by children and adolescents to identify whether they are indeed children or adolescents. And this is, as we know, this is very hard. Also, there's the need to have direct channels between platforms and law enforcement authorities. And of course, for the companies to have some kind of representation in Brazil with those companies. So a legal representation or someone who are actually responsible for the platforms in the country. There is the need for transparency. This is also present in our digital privacy law that we call LGPD, but it hasn't been enforced so far, but probably with the digital ECA, it's going to happen. And the obligation to communicate to authorities situations that involve immediate risk to the lives of these minors. This is what we call in our field an emergency situation. This was finally put into a law in Brazil, and it's really being enforced recently. We also have in Mexico a proposal for a general cybersecurity law. This is a project that is aimed at creating a national cybersecurity agency, now establishing incident reports obligations for infrastructure companies and digital platforms, and creating specific criminal types for cyber attacks and complex digital crimes. In Chile, we have a personal data protection law. It's actually an update to a previous law that they already have. It's already approved and it's final phase for being actually established. It's a profound reform in Chilean legislation that aligns the country with European GDPR standards. And we see a lot of that, right? Legislation in Latin America looking a lot to what they're doing in Europe, but also to what they're doing in the US. It also creates a Chilean Personal Data Protection Agency that is pretty much similar to what we have here in Brazil with the ANPD, and it's getting bigger as some kind of watchdog for those companies. This agency establishes very severe sanctions for data leakage and impose strict transparency obligations for digital platforms in general. And finally, looking to Argentina, there's a draft bill on internet intermediaries liability and recent digital platforms regulatory bill. Pretty much, those are various initiatives that are being taken in the Argentinian Congress to discuss the civil liability regime of social networks and search engines for third-party generated content, addressing topics such as the removal of illicit content, what we are known as notice and take down, hate speech, and protection against image or honor rights. So those are some of the new bills that are hitting the region. And we see the response being very, very used by trust and safety teams throughout the world. But as local companies, as we were addressing just now with Alex and Ohana's speeches, as they are not used to work with that here, we get in a very difficult situation.
Thank you so much. Yeah, and then obviously there's judicial exposure that can create, fines and all kinds of other issues. So with that, I want to turn over to Alex again. And although we understand, right, that the region is not a monolith, right? What are some of the general expectations of users in the region when it comes to trust and safety, platform, and the end user experience?
Yeah, I was going to start by saying, yeah, the region can be anything from Sao Paulo to Chile, where, I am from, to rural Guatemala, right? So, like you said, it's not a monolith. Um, but a few things do travel between these places. I think one big thing to keep in mind is how people use technology before we would even get into the harms. And the way a lot of people in Latin America use technology is like this is just an example, but the phone is the internet for a lot of people. So not it's not just a way of getting online, it's the way that people get online. And messaging apps ends up being often where commerce actually happens. So somebody's entire business can be on a WhatsApp thread or something like that. So when you get an enforcement decision wrong in that context, it's not just an inconvenience because you're not just serving a user that may have several other apps available and may be able to use, oh, if I can't use Uber, I'm going to use Lyft, that type of decisions. You're actually perhaps somebody loses their income that day. So I think that suspensions that are not clear quickly enough, bad suspensions, that's the type of things where I think we want to get all the decisions right. And it's tricky, but keeping in mind how people use technology locally is very helpful. I think another one is speed. A lot of the harms that we are facing in the region really don't stay online. Um, Extortion, um, uh, in looking for recruiting children into let's not even talk about criminal gangs, but let's talk about even like scam gangs nowadays. Um, all of these harms, people are expecting speed. And where formal recourse is slow and where like regulations are still doing their work, where you don't have an available recourse with a company, your customer is just going to leave. Nobody's going to be waiting around 2 months for a policy review and a decision if they have like a serious situation on their hands. Often also people ask once, and I don't think that gets appreciated enough. Sometimes people just stop reporting if you have and you don't have a good system like a trust and safety system where people can actually do reporting and understand who is the person that is actually going to get back to them, or what is the part of the company that's going to do that in which time frame. I think local fluency is another user expectation. People know when something has been, translated with AI. They realize if you're sending them a form email that, has ellos and ellas the wrong way or something, people notice these things. And if you want customers to take you seriously in LatAm market, you have to respect that. And that means often, hiring practitioners that have experience in the region, have experience at least with the languages spoken in the region. And I would say, that's probably the hard core of it, the global safety standards, local fluency that we talked about, and speed. Um, and I think that often what gets shipped for trust and safety in regions like Latin America is underinvested, but there's really a good opportunity to, now that there's like such a diverse group of practitioners that come from Latin America or have been trained to serve Latin American people, that have been trained in trust and safety, that handle the languages that the region speaks. I think there's great opportunity to just upscale there.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Cultural fluency is critical, right? And even within the region, it's again not a monolith. Language translation happens, all the time. The way that one word is said in one country versus another. With that in mind and what we've discussed, I want to turn to Ohana and ask you, how would you characterize corporate readiness? And I don't just mean like platforms, but businesses too that might deploy the systems, right? Whether it's the new AI systems or their own internal platforms that they might have, and any blind spots that corporations, businesses might be having when it comes to trust and safety.
That's very interesting, Alba, because I was thinking that the first answer, the first interaction of Alex here is right on my thoughts on your question. I would say that corporate readiness in Latin America is uneven and disconnected because it's not only compliance, it's not only legal, there's a gap between them. We need to think about our structure that is more binded, that only one team solving one problem and another team solving another crisis. I think there is somehow awareness in trust and safety right now, very, very low, but it's still happening. But what it is way less mature in Latin America is the organizational infrastructure around them: ownership, specialized expertise, cross-functional processes, metrics, and the ability to move from reactive incident management to proactive risk prevention. And that comes not only about processes, but also about teams. I mean, when you have a crisis, you need someone who is able to talk to law enforcement in a way that they will understand that the business, the corporation, is not only running a business, but they also willing to help, to provide information, to to collaborate with the criminal investigations. You must have a team prepared to respond to data incidents, not only about the ones that happen with hackers or teams that deal with cybersecurity, but also those that receive data requests from law enforcement and properly respond to them. And I think that one side, regulation and user expectations are moving quite fast, and the other side, many organizations are still figuring out how to operationalize these expectations. For example, in Brazil, we already have a law, as Paulo mentioned, that is enforcing the way that trust and safety in Brazil is handled. Not only when a accident happens or an incident happens, but from the start, like which type of content are the children and adolescents getting access to? What are you doing to prevent any harm to them? How are you assuring that these people, these child and adolescents, they are being taken care of in a digital environment? And it's not only about making safe for them, but also to ensure that no harm will reach them. It's not only about platform as social media or games, but also any type of digital service. That is the main point. So for a company, it's not simply a question of having a legal team, for example, that understands the regulation. You need product people who understand safety by design. You need engineers who can implement appropriate controls. You need data and privacy specialists who can think about age assurance without creating unnecessary data collection. You need operation teams that can detect and respond to harm. And you need leadership that can actually make decisions about safety and risks. This is a trust and safety operating model.
Thank you so much. Now that we've established, so, there's a tension. How do we close the gap? And I think that this is a place that we can also talk about, and I'm going to go a little bit and sort of ask around to each one of you now. How do we close that gap? How do we, make sure that if there is inaction, right? What are the risks? But not only the risk, but what can we do? And one of the areas I want to emphasize is one of the reasons why this partnership was created, right, between the Integrity Institute and Bluwall, which is, how can we serve the region, the businesses, the regulators, the civil society that are addressing the myriad of risks that are happening? So let's start with the risk, and whoever wants to take it first, but then how can we partner and help locally? So I'll actually go first to Paulo really quick, and then we'll move down to the rest.
Thanks, Alba. I really believe that the Integrity Institute and Bluwall are positioned in the perfect spot to support the region, right? The Integrity Institute, as Theodora mentioned in her opening remarks, is basically powered by the professionals that make part of it, right? So we're talking about very experienced professionals with experience on handling this kind of situations global-wide, and including Latin America, right? However, in a lot of senses, there's still a little bit of a gap, as Ohana pointed out, and Alex pretty much as well, where even with this expertise, we lack in those multinational companies regional knowledge, regional understanding, and this is what Bluwall is here for, to exactly bridge this between those multinational, international professionals and this knowledge with the local understanding and everything that happens here. And this, in a lot of senses, as I see, is what will put the companies, especially companies operating here, but as well companies, multinational companies that are everywhere, but also here, in a better position to attend to the needs of local people, right? So I guess this would be the first portion of it, of how we can operate together and how we can support this market in a way that local companies do not lose a share of market because they're unable to attend to risks and issues that happen within their platforms. As Ohana mentioned, there needs to be a very professional structure to be responding to that. And there's, of course, other ways for cooperation between Bluwall, Integrity Institute, and those companies that are here. How, if a new company is trying to understand this, if they're trying to establish some kind of trust and safety structure, it's way harder for them to try to do that out of the blue or with their own understanding of what this should be done. And that's what we see in a lot of senses, right? As I mentioned before, with the regulation that are happening, basically throughout the region, we see companies just trying to improvise. And that's where problems starts to happen.
Thank you very much. And that's exactly right, right? The Integrity Institute is truly a unique organization in the sense that there are not very many organizations that have the breadth of expertise that the Institute has. The average length of experience of our Institute members are 12 years of experience, and not just the platforms, but the AI systems. and more just so the platforms, right? It's also the companies that are trying to implement some of this, you know, some of these systems, right? And they're not looking at the risk. So I want to turn over really quickly to Alex, and we're not at the takeaway yet, I want to turn to Alex. What are some of the ideas that we have been discussing, right, in terms of closing that gap between the knowledge and the expertise, and how what we can support not only the platforms, but even your regular business that might try to be implementing some of these systems while complying with the various different laws?
Thank you, Alba. Well, the Integrity Institute supports many different forms of engagement. We have the clinics. I mean, there's a long list of types of ways that the Integrity Institute can support both local new companies that might be in the region, as well as established companies that have a footprint in the region. I think if it's okay to share, one of the latest ideas that we've been developing is, for instance, to share some of our expertise in dealing with crises and escalations, and help train your people, the people from the companies, the people that are supposed to answer to something that goes wrong, train them and support them, give them some experience simulating a crisis that we design, and we can also help them learn from any mistakes, or learn from a best practice that somebody displayed in that exercise. And this can be something that we package for a small group of people just once, in a short, in a perhaps an afternoon, but it can also be a bigger training, a couple of days. It can be a recurrent thing for a team of people that are going to be there in your first point of defense when something goes wrong. So that's just one example of the types of things that the Integrity Institute can do for companies like you.
Thank you, thank you. And I want to go back because I know that Ohana, and before we sort of move to the takeaway and then take it to Theo to expand a little bit more about what the Institute actually have, Institute and Bluwall, right, and in our partnership can help, is can you once again, sort of stress what are the risks to inaction, not just to the platforms, but to regular businesses themselves that are implementing these systems, right? Because we all know that technology is advancing much faster than policy regulation, not just at the government level, but internal policy. And then with that tension between the end user or your customers, if you will. What are some of those risks? And given the unevenness of readiness that you mentioned in the region, can you stress a little bit some of the consequences of not acting on having a robust trust and safety plan and execution?
Yeah, sure. One of the biggest consequences that I can think of is the lack of trust from users. Because I myself, if I know that my data was leaked somehow because, I don't know, a hacker um, did something to your software, or because someone on your team was not careful enough to safeguard a database, or because someone inside your company, your business, is selling data for other, or for people who want to take my data to do some sort of crime, I will not trust you. I will not use your service. And this is not only about me. This is about a broad range of people who now is living digitally. We are all the time with our phones. We use internet to order food, to schedule meetings, to make bank transfers. So if I choose one business, one company over another because I feel safer with them, this is a huge problem. When I have, for example, we had a company in Brazil, a delivery food service, that had a problem with leaked data from users that impacted over 1.2 million users in Brazil. So can you imagine 1.2 million of people moving to another company because they don't trust that business, that company anymore? To me, this is the biggest problem, the biggest consequences of being inactive about building a safe, strong, and trust and safety environment in your company. And also there's secondary also besides the business reputation, we have a lot of examples in Brazil specifically where the courts expeded orders, for example, to suspend the service for a certain period of time because they were not getting right the requirements from law enforcement, for example, because the environment for users were so harmed that the courts needed to intervene on that. So can you imagine if a business is not allowed to run in a country because judges think that they are not safe enough to users? This is a huge thing on the business reputation, not only on that country, but globally, because we know that news travels fast, even more when it's about something so 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 bad as this. So the risk of being inactive, it involves users, involves the business operation itself, and the how this company will be seen globally. That's why I think that being in the risk of inflation is the worst possible for a company to not think about, like to not consider it, to wait for a crisis to take action.
No, yeah, that is definitely the takeaway. That building a trust, and we can move to the next slide. So the takeaway, is building a local trust and safety capacity in the region. It's not only a compliance requirement, but it's a business imperative that affects your bottom line, right? For platforms, for businesses to survive and compete on a global scale. And given the Institute's members' extensive trust and safety expertise in building, deploying, and governing platforms,
Graças a Deus, apresentava a namorada da mãe, Zuka.
I'm
Ele tá
sorry,
vendo?
systems, in our partnership with Bluwall, we can be a highly effective partner to strengthen local trust and safety capacity and implementation. So, Theodora, can you please provide us a quick overview of how we can partner with industry and organizations across the region? Next slide.
Absolutely. So, this is a list of the kinds of service and program offerings that Integrity Institute members have contributed in the last several years. And we would be very pleased to contribute these programming and service offerings to partners throughout the region. So, first on tailored research, we've we've undertaken a number of research efforts on a whole range of issues. This includes AI, transparency related concerns or issues, civic integrity, best practices in a number of domains around the trust and safety and responsible tech ecosystem broadly. We also have integrity clinics where we can offer specialized support on specific questions of interest, broad consulting services. And I'll note that this has included work that we've done in support of regulatory bodies like Ofcom in the United Kingdom and the European Commission across the European Union. So not just companies or nonprofits, but also government organizations. And we're happy to support intergovernmental organizations like the United Nations or bodies like that. We can do education and training. For example, right now, we're in conversation with legislators throughout the United States on how they might think about tech legislation generally. We're not telling them what to do, but we're giving them guidance on issues like AI specifically, based on the experiences of members collectively and informed by the experiences that they've had. We also have webinars. So these are meant to be public facing. We've had webinars on issues like the EU AI Act and the US executive order on AI under the Biden administration, as well as other themes. So these are meant to be more like public awareness events, and we're happy to host these on a number of issues and to a wide audience that we can promote to across social media, such as LinkedIn. Our Trust in Tech podcast is one that we've done now for several years. We've had podcast discussions on themes like deepfakes, so artificially generated imagery, including in the political context, as well as conversations on electoral integrity and a whole range of other issues. Right now, we're doing a series on trade-offs, including around safety and privacy, and where those tensions lie in the trust and safety world. And last is publications, informing greater ecosystems. Some of this is informed by the research that we've done that I mentioned earlier. We also do publications, for example, in response to requests for input. We've recently been providing responses that we have then published to the oversight board for information such as deactivated accounts and intimate image abuse and tech facilitated gender-based violence, as well as a submission to the UK Department of Science, Innovation and Technology on child safety, which is another area of expertise that many of our members have. So this is a list of the kinds of work that we've been doing. There are so many ways in which we could partner with organizations throughout the Latin American region, and we would be very, very happy to do so.
Thank you so much. April, I know that I saw a hand somewhere.
Yes. Okay, so it is now time for the Q&A. We have a little under 10 minutes, or just about 10 minutes if folks are willing to stay a couple minutes. We do have a question in the chat, and then I saw a hand up from Julia. But first, we'll go with the question in chat from Marcelo, and he asks, how do you see the role of law enforcement liaisons to support trust and safety teams around Latin America? And if I can call on Paulo here, who is also former law enforcement, maybe he can give a bit of insight into this question.
My pleasure, April. This is a very good question. And it's very interesting because not all companies that have trust and safety structure, not necessarily they do have law enforcement liaison or law enforcement outreach, as we usually call them. So I really feel that this is a great way for us to inform internal teams, internal companies within trust and safety on the trends and the emerging risks that are happening within a country or specific region. So those units, and I have been a law enforcement outreach since I had left law enforcement in 2019, so I can tell this from experience. We are able to actually gather information, gather intelligence from law enforcement, of course, and provide this to the companies so they can improve tools, they can enhance detection capabilities, they can understand slangs, they can understand how to deal with pressure from a certain government, and this is pretty much provided by this team, right? Law enforcement liaison or outreach. So I would advise on all companies to have something like that. It's not because I work with it, but because I see how efficient it can be and how it can be supportive to a company in general, and of course to the users in that region, right? Because they will be more safer, they will be attended faster, and the companies will be able to be more effective again when addressing those issues.
I jump in here just because, April, I actually want to ask you a question because we've discussed this before in that regard.
Uh-huh.
And a lot of people get, in the various, whether it's civil society or others, that when they're in the platform, as it relates, for instance, of child safety, right? When is the time to contact law enforcement, right? What is the protocol that when you see an adolescent threatening harm, for instance? So if you can just briefly expand on that, and I know that was a plan.
Yeah, so there are often times when users find themselves, unfortunately, in a crisis situation or maybe witnessing another user going through a crisis situation. A very perhaps unfortunate experience of recently was the Perez Hilton live stream that was on TikTok. And it took quite a while for about over 30 minutes for that live stream to be taken down, and users were indeed reporting that live stream. But a lot of users who were perhaps in that, stream or coming across it just on their For You pages weren't immediately able to figure out what to do. So a thing that we can help with here at the Integrity Institute is even just like best practices for users, educational resources, etc., on how to educate users on safety education and in terms of like what can a user do when they do encounter this so they're not scrambling and being exposed to potentially harmful content themselves. But there are ways that companies can proactively think about what user safety education can look like, and they should think about that, just so it also protects them and makes them more prepared as well when an incident does occur on their platform. I often liken safety education to in terms of like preventative health education. You don't necessarily need to be in crisis to see a therapist, for example, or to go get a checkup. Same thing around safety education. You don't need to be in acute crisis, or you do not to be witnessing acute crisis to seek out and learn about those safety education resources. Is there anything else about that, Alba, you want to talk about?
No, thank you, thank you. I'm
Uh-huh.
sorry. I just
No
jumped
worries.
in there. Now we had someone with a hand.
Yes, I believe Julia had her hand up, and if you still have a question, we would love to hear it. And I think you're
Yeah.
able to come off mute. Yeah, there you go.
Hi, that was me. Hi, everyone. I'm Julia. I'm program coordinator at Allendar Consulting. And I'm also II member since 2023. So I've been here since the very beginning. Um, and this is more of a poking your brains question because everyone here has so much experience and so much under their belt. Also, Paulo, we have clients in common, so you may understand where I'm coming from with that question. But one of the big challenges, and because I'm in consulting, I work with several different companies at different scales and different types of products and different kinds of UGC. But one of the challenges I've faced throughout my career, and now more than ever, is navigating internal decisions. So, because for example, us that are here in Brazil and in Latin America, I've covered Latin America from the beginning of my career, so I know it's it's a dumpster fire. It's very messy. Each country has its own challenges, but they're all very big, very serious challenges, and they're often not markets that are not priorities for the business. So in your experience, and this is a broad question to everyone in the panel, but from your experience, what is the best way for navigating internal advocacy when you're in those quote unquote marginalized markets, which is, for example, not true for Brazil because Brazil is top five largest markets for most of the biggest platforms. So it's a very important market, but it's just not have the population does not have as much money to spend on those platforms. So sometimes it's very challenging to convincing leadership, convincing people that are not based in the region to invest and to hire vendors and to increase the trust and safety team and to hire law enforcement officials. And so yeah, so I just wanted to hear from your experience, the best ways of navigating that, or if it's navigable at all. But yeah, I was just curious. I just wanted to poke your brain about that because I think from everywhere I've worked, this was a challenge. Navigating this. And we're still struggling. I've been in this field for a while and we're always struggling. It never seems to get any better. But yeah, that's it. Thank you. Sorry, I'll shut up now.
If I could say something to that, I think we think a lot about what to do when a crisis is upon us and how to argue favorably. It usually for us in trust and safety, we want people to be protected and the harmful content or harmful behavior not to spread. So we do a lot of thinking about what to do in crises. I think one of the best things that you can also do when the crisis is not upon you, but you want to create the stage for successful advocacy is to create mechanisms, even if they seem very silly, processes for tracking crises and escalations. I've seen so many companies that don't track these at all. And the argument at the end of the day is always going to be a return on investment argument. If you don't have data, if you only have the anecdotal experience, or you could say, oh, remember we had an escalation in February of last year, that's not going to be enough often if you're talking about a market that's underrepresented. I think another thing to keep in mind when you're arguing for a market that might not be a priority is that depending on the product or platform, um, whatever it is that you have, if it is a platform, for instance, content can spread from one market to another. So another thing to think is like how to start looking at those networks of how content spreads from one market to another. And maybe you can make an argument that, oh, look at the return on investment. If we help support and strengthen our capacities in this market here, we don't have the mess that occurs in this other market in 2 months, right? And that's the market that the company cares more about. So there's all these little techniques or tips that I could offer, but I think trying to think about those processes when you're not in the crisis can be super helpful.
Thank you so much. And I know we're at time. I want to thank everyone for joining us. You have seen on the screen, how to reach out to us. Please feel free to connect with the Integrity Institute or with Bluwall. We definitely can support your efforts. And I just wanted to say to Julia really quick, in my work in another prior throughout Latin America, and it's different than majority, than other countries. A lot of it has to do with relationships. So I want to pinpoint that perhaps in moments of not crisis, if it's local, one of the ways to get the needle moving is to try to establish relationships locally, whether it's with law enforcement or regulators, and I hope that helps. Thank you, everyone, and have a great rest of your evening.